Hey, what's up? How's it going, everybody? Once again, I ran the Twitch test program before starting up the stream, so that I could guarantee that the bitrate wasn't going to be so wildly out of whack. And it seems that the connectivity issues to the Ashburn, Virginia server are also not that bad anymore. Honest to God, as silly as it sounds, I honestly think that there was some weather-related signal interference going on at the Ashburn server. I don't know why, because clearly I was not experiencing that same interference when connecting to the New York server, which I'm still connected to for the purposes of this stream. I want to see if the connection stability of myself between myself and the Ashburn server holds between this stream and next stream. And if it does, then I can comfortably switch back to the default server then. But either way, I think I'm going to keep the dynamic bitrate setting in place. Either way, I'm back. The hurricane has swept by, and it's now hot and muggy again, so that's going to suck a little bit. But you guys don't have to experience that. I do. Hello, Dird313. Welcome to chat. Always good to have new faces here. Yeah, last time I talked about the corruption charges that Mayor Eric Adams has been brought up on in the justice system by the Department of Justice, mind you. How are you? I'm doing pretty all right. Like I said, it's hot and muggy, so I might get kind of frustrated this stream because I don't have air conditioning in my room really. But I don't want to let that stop me from talking about some of the stuff that I wanted to talk about this stream and the stuff that I wanted to do this stream. Um, we do politics here, but I feel like my racing skills haven't been quite up to par last few streams. I want to feel like I'm driving well this time. I think that's important. And then if I can talk about the topics that I have lined up, then that's a bonus. That sucks. Yeah. Well, look, if you think it's bad now, you should have been here during the summer. 90 degrees in my room during the summer. And today it's like 83. What's it supposed to get up to today? 84? Okay, yeah. Which is not terrible, but it's not ideal either. Alright, they're on Cheeseland. Let's spectate Boss Boy 28 here as I line up the obligatory trans rights segment. I hate summer, it's too hot outside. I don't like summer when I'm not at the beach. I'll be perfectly honest. You know, it can be nice if you're nearby a body of water. In fact, I really like surfing. You can see my surfboard in the background there. I unfortunately haven't gotten to go to the beach in quite a while because the closest beach is the Outer Banks, and the Outer Banks are actively disappearing as a product of climate change, and the high tides progressively coming closer in, the storm surge taking longer to go away. You know, it's not great for a average East Coast surfing enjoyer. We have a river, not a beach. Hey man, look, I'd take a river at this point. I've swum in rivers before. I think the what is it, the James River or something? Whatever river is accessible in like Rockbridge County or whatever. You go down to like Glasgow, Virginia. Probably nobody knows what I'm talking about, but there's a point where two major rivers kind of converge in the mountains in Virginia, and I've swum in that before, and it's nice. Too dangerous to swim there? Okay, yeah. Yeah, there's some parts of the river where you don't want to do that. It's very hot here. For some reason, it gets hotter and hotter every single year, probably because of the space lasers. Probably. But most likely what it is just climate change. If you look at the temperature charts of both air and water temperatures, you can't find a water tornado there. Oh, you can find a water tornado there. Oh, yeah, that does sound pretty dangerous. Yeah, globalize my agenda. If you look at the temperature charts for both air and water temperatures, 2024 is the hottest year on record thus far, and it's not close. There's like a people who've seen this graph will know what I'm talking about. There's like a big amalgam of lines that go sort of up and down with regards to the seasons, and that's like the average temperature at that point in the year. That those numbers have gone up with time, according to the like trends of climate change and whatever. 2023 was the at the very top of that sort of assortment of lines, but still held the general pattern. 2024 is like breaking with the pattern entirely. Every month this year has been the hottest that month in 100,000 years. January 2024, hottest January in 100,000 years. February 2024, hottest February in 100,000 years. And, you know, the same goes for this September as well. September 2024 was the hottest month of September in 100,000 years of recorded history. You can refer to, like, ice cores for a lot of the stuff. You know, we have data on climatological conditions going back, well, several ice ages. But regardless, 2024 is the hottest year in about 100,000 years. And that's going to be, like, you're going to feel that. And you're going to see that, too. You know, that permafrost be melting over in Siberia. Hurricanes are getting worse and worse. That storm surge in the south after Hurricane Helene was really bad. Helene is projected to be by no means the last storm of this hurricane season as well. So, you know, basically what I'm trying to say is, like, you are not alone, and, you know, there is an explanation for why things fucking suck. The ice is melting, which is dangerous. Yeah, we getting that here, but with cold. Oh, yeah, that's true. One of one of the things that climate change is going to do, overall, the Earth is going to get warmer, drastically. But there's also, because of rapidly shifting climatological conditions, because of the deterioration of things like the Gulf Stream, and because of also, like, the melting of ice caps and stuff like that, which will alter ocean currents, which is going to alter wind currents, etc., etc., because of that, some places are actually going to get a bit colder. There's going to be some really goofy weather. Places that are usually, like, not cold are going to experience random cold snaps and cold spells and stuff like that. Things are going to overall get much warmer, but they're also just going to be plainly much more volatile, too. $40 every single summer, which sucks with no AC. Like, you mean the Middle East will be cold? I don't know if the Middle East specifically, but I think there are some places in Africa, maybe? I don't know. It's possible the Middle East could be on this list of places that, like, get a little bit colder as a product of climate change. But I think one of the examples I can search for is, like, Africa, like North Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa, something like that. I'd have to look back at some of the news articles and, like, study summaries that I've seen on the subject. Lucky me, then. Well, I mean, there are a lot of places that are already hot that are just going to become outright unlivable. For example, a lot of the Middle East is just going to be underwater, unfortunately. Like, Qatar's fucking donezo. But, you know, some other places might be okay. There's a simple solution here the climate nerds just haven't thought of. Just move. Is it getting too cold for you? Move somewhere where it's getting warmer. Easy solution. So true. This definitely will not produce a mass migratory pattern of hundreds of millions, potentially even billions of refugees that will instantly crash the entire global society as a product of people evacuating areas where it is too hot, or from, you know, submerged like areas. I'm from Iraq. I don't think we will drown. No, Iraq is going to be okay. Because in Iraq, the coastline has actually been doing something goofy in the other direction. the coastline of the Persian Gulf has actually been moving outwards because the continental plates of Arabia and Asia are moving closer to each other. But Iraq also, in addition to that that might get evened out as a result of climate change and rising sea levels. But there's also, Iraq has mountains and it's like decently high elevation. So in terms of land mass, Iraq will still be livable, right? People not being okay with people moving into their country. I'm not even speaking from a perspective of ideology either. I'm talking from a perspective of the mass migratory patterns that we will see as a result of climate change will be so massive that no country on Earth will be able to fully deal with it. There's going to be massive societal upheaval in the next several decades because of how many people will be displaced. Like, Nazis get upset when a few tens of thousands of people are displaced from an ongoing war zone, right? Like, a few, like, thousands of people were entering Europe every year as a product of the war in Syria, to which that can very easily be handled by modern states with modern infrastructure, and in fact, it is even a benefit that, albeit comes with some growing pains. The climate crisis will make that look like fucking chump change. Climate change doesn't sound like a big deal to me. You don't have to shovel snow in the winter, drive near the... And why drive near the beach when the beach can come to you? True. Although, unfortunately, the rising sea levels will happen too fast for there to really be a beach near where the new ocean front is going to be. Sand takes a really, really fucking long time to form. So the coastline that you're going to get is going to be swamps and bogs and perennial wetlands. You're not going to have any particularly pretty beaches unless there's a place where, like, there's already, like, an active continental margin where the beach isn't going to be that severely affected. Mountainous beaches will be fine. If you're in the Baltics, this is basically a fuck you, you get swampland kind of moment. There's a lot of sandy areas. That's what I'm talking about. The sandy beaches are so low elevation relative to the water. The ocean's going to consume all of that. And it's going to happen in a short enough span of time that when the new, like gravel and shit. Gravel beaches maybe, because if you're on gravelly terrain generally, then maybe that can be maintained. But it takes millions and millions of years to produce new sand. You understand what I'm talking about? The beaches that exist currently have been there for a long fucking time, because geological processes have had time to play out to literally grind and weather and erode rocks down to grains of sand, right? When an oceanfront change like the rising sea levels happens in the span of decades or even a century or two, that's not enough time for a new beach to form. A lot of the beaches in the world will just be consumed. Beaches are imported most of the time. Yeah, but that shit is expensive and takes effort. There's a massive industrial pipeline that happens to, like, import beach sands. Yeah, I know the process by which countries literally take sand to make a new beach. That pipeline is actually going to be disrupted by climate change, because any beach that they make before the ocean, like, kind of settles is just going to be consumed again. And the sort of importing sand and purchasing sand to create beaches at an industrial level is a purely aesthetic process, right? A process that is not going to be able to be at the forefront of most countries' minds when the big political order of the day is that, holy shit, there are hundreds of millions of people evacuating from Southeast Asia because the area is no longer livable, and they need somewhere to go so they don't literally starve or die of exposure. Like, we are so far off from being able to think of that once climate change really, like, once the beaches start, like, actually going away and being consumed entirely. That's what I meant when I said that there's not going to really be an Outer Banks anymore. And in fact, the Outer Banks is an exception because there's, like, sand inland for a ways. About 5 feet of ocean rise, and there will still be beach there because the whole Outer Banks is a big sandbar. But once the entire Outer Banks is consumed, no more beach. The coastline on the mainland East Coast, just as an example, that's swampland. And the ocean, like sea level rise of about 20 feet, which is, I think, what's currently projected, that's going to go a decent ways inland. There's not going to be any sand at the point when the ocean level is done rising. Doubt they'll come to Lithuania. We're pretty far away from them. They will. Or either that, or Lithuania is going to be one of the countries where people will have to evacuate from. Any country where people are not evacuating from as a result of sea level rises and climate change are going to be countries where people evacuate to. And that's just the sea level rises. There are desert areas in some of them in Africa, some of them in the Middle East and whatnot, that are going to become so hot that it's even more unlivable than it already is. And people are going to also need to evacuate because of that. I don't expect that to produce as many refugees because those places aren't as heavily populated to begin with. But places like the U.S. West, like the intermediate U.S. West, will be severely worsened by desertification. Same thing with some parts of Africa and some parts of the Middle East. Again, some of this is hard for me to predict because I'm not an expert, and even experts agree that there's a lot of moving parts to this. It's not good. There's not going to be anywhere on Earth where you are free from the effects of this. Everywhere is going to be affected severely in one way or the other. Only Samagosha will be underwater. They're barely Lithuanian anyway. Doesn't matter. It's all fun in games now, but, you know. Just look out for those news headlines, right? Yes, the nudes. Great, cool. Climate change does, in fact, mean free nudes for everybody. It's going to be so hot that everybody takes all their clothes off. Yes. Yeah. Correction, I live in a coastal desert city. We're fucked. Yeah, that might, that doesn't bode well. If that's the case, right, I'm not going to be alarmist in the moment and say you have to move out of there as quickly as possible. But I think just, make some longer term plans to maybe move somewhere else and be like, okay, this place is probably going to be underwater in a couple of decades. Maybe we'll find somewhere else to live and to settle down, right? And in fact, there are actually going to be some coastal cities that are okay. Because like I said, the ocean is going to rise, the sea levels are going to rise by about, I think, 20 feet is the projection. And there are some coastal cities that are a bit more mountainous that have an elevation of, like, well above 20 feet. For example, think of somewhere like Tangier, right? Tangier is a pretty mountainous area where most of the terrain there is actually more than 20 feet above sea level. So a lot of the city is going to be consumed by that, but most of the city is going to be left above water. Bunch of keyboard letters. Welcome to chat. What are my political opinions? That's going to take a long time to explain, but as a shorthand, you can refer to me either as an anarchist or a socialist. That's probably where I fit best on the political spectrum. All the oil is on our coastline. Maybe climate change will be kind of bad. I mean, yeah, climate change is going to be kind of bad. I don't know, what that has to do with the oil, though, on being on the coast there. I mean, climate change is definitely going to disrupt the fossil fuel industry, but you want that to happen, because the fossil fuel industry is what caused this whole mess in the first place. But yeah, whatever the fuck that name is. My political opinions are like I'm a socialist. I'm an anarchist. You can call me either of those. Basically, want a socialist state without a government. I don't want a state. The end goal should be an anarcho-syndicalist society where there is no nation-state form and no commodity form. I believe in order to do that, you do have to have transitory phases. Obviously, this is a very difficult thing to just do all at once. So in the intermediate period, I would certainly support market socialist reforms and things like that. But eventually, at some point, there's going to be a need for more radical pushes internationally, or just like it's not a state, but just a country internationally. I'm not a huge fan of the nation state, not a huge fan of national boundaries either. But at some point, I do expect the world to take the shape of there are various states that are some form of like market socialist or something like that, you know? Oh, keep getting willy bumped. Star. I like that. It's a good place to use that, I think. How would that work out? Wouldn't it just kind of collapse and lead to a bunch of gangs ideologies taking over and claiming terrain and this just remaking states? No. That's what we have right now. That's called capitalism, where there is private ownership and control of territory through means of controlled violence. You're also really loading this when I've only provided the most general sort of philosophical parameters for like basic principles that I would want society to adhere to. That could be sort of sussed out with greater like attention and discussion over detail. How do you control it so no one makes a state without a state? You don't control it. It's the entire idea of socialism is that it is democratic. Control is diffused between as many hands as possible, so no one person is capable of like asserting that kind of dominance. You know, all of what I'm talking about comes through like fundamentally through an expansion of democratic social conventions, institutions, etc. Basically, the expansion of a democratic social contract to encompass more and more of society. You know, this is literally just an argument against democracy. You realize that, right? What if me and the bros want fascism just to create our own state? Then I'm sorry to say, please face the wall. Wouldn't our tribalistic tendencies naturally come and make us divide into groups and claim terrain? How do you get everyone on board with it? You don't. You don't get everyone on board with it because people are fucking stupid. What you do is you start to subtly construct those systems over time. Look, the way that socialism, a more state-devolved, I guess, socialist system is going to arise is the same way that capitalism arose, from within feudalism, gradually overtaking it over time with an increased amount of class consciousness and like different interests being at play and changing material conditions, etc., right? The entire way that you're phrasing this is as if it happens in one revolutionary period. What keeps up those systems without a government? People? Like what the fuck are you on about? Again, everything that you're saying here is just anti-democratic. I hope you realize this. Oh, how do you have who keeps up the government without a king, right? I'll be real, I don't care for this, especially when people invoke tribalism as a like, oh, this would never work, democracy would never work, tribalism exists. Meanwhile, the concept of liberal democracy just sitting on the sidelines. Not to say that works especially well, but, you know, they don't exactly crumple at the lightest touch. You have to be a little bit more concerted than that. You know, democracy, despite what authoritarians like this chucklefuck would suggest, are pretty stable, which is why it takes fucking decades upon decades upon decades of worldwide and sustained reactionary consent manufacturing in order to destabilize and even get them to a point where they're vulnerable enough to be taken over by reactionary forces. In democracy, there's different groups that control the system. They are elected. The government has power over police to keep them in the public line. Oh, so you're just an ML then. Gotcha. I don't know if there are any mods in chat right now. I'm gonna use this here, right? Ow. You're an anarchist state, what stops you from killing someone, doing immoral things, and so on? Well, there wouldn't be a state. That's kind of how anarchism works. And what stops you from killing someone? I don't know. The fucking... like, if you wanted to kill somebody, I don't know, everybody else in the community has the authority to just tackle you. You know? And the entire reason that people commit murder or even have a screw loose such that they commit murder in the first place is because of antisocial tendencies that can be systemically redressed by very vigorous social work institutions and whatnot. But it's very hard for me to convey just how little patience and respect I have for arguments from authoritarians. So I'm not going to ban you, but I am going to mute you for 10 minutes because I really don't feel like engaging with that right now. Today is not the day for that. Sorry. I'm sure if I, like, pushed a little bit, they would defend concentration camps, too. Like, it's always the same with nation-states and their accolades. At first, it's, oh, we need the police because they serve an essential function, and then you bring up the Border Patrol, and they're like, yeah, actually, immigrants are degenerate. But leftistly because they're an ML or some shit. And look, this was already a massive derailing of the conversation. I was talking about climate change, and then you asked me my opinions. Get the fuck out of here. For 10 minutes. Ugh. Man, that's frustrating. Dude, there was other stuff I wanted to talk about too, and because I had to deal with that fuck, I couldn't pull it up between races. So now you guys have to wait a little longer to hear about, like, the news about, like, anti-trans laws in various states, now that they've been in place long enough for us to have reliable data on their after effects. And then also, what else? Oh yeah, there was a theory bit actually relating to environmentalism that I wanted to talk about. As somebody coined it, the green to AFD pipeline. Actually, you know what? I can get started on the theory segment right now because that's not something I like really need a source for. I can refer back to the tweet that mentioned it if I need to, but really it's like it's just a talking head kind of thing rather than like a strictly news segment. So a lot of something that people have brought up as of late, especially as the AfD is gaining a lot of ground in Germany, and as people seem to be defecting to the far right en masse, is that the demographic of people who are defecting to the far right are not necessarily that which you would expect. That being young people predominantly in the country of Germany, as well as former AfD voters. Also, don't throw green shells back at the line, you fucking dickhead. The green to AfD pipeline is a very real thing, as confusing as it might sound to a lot of people. Some people have mentioned the sort of hippie to Nazi pipeline. That is a component part of this. But there's one thing that I want to hammer in on first, right? And that is the consequence of greenwashing capitalism, right? The only reason that an environmentalist to fascist or environmentalist to Nazi pipeline exists, the reason that such a pipeline exists is because the like socially and politically accepted forms of environmentalism right now are ones that do not threaten the basis of private capital and the sort of property relations that currently exist, the existing social order. In order to have meaningful redress of environmental issues, in order to effectively manage the consequences of climate change, to truly minimize the amount of damage that can do to society and sort of create a more sustainable set of structures that can well not cause the same crisis again, you have to get rid of capitalism. You have to address the root causes of things that drive climate change in the first place. For example, the fossil fuel industry, the sort of incentives for people to rely on very quick and dirty sources of energy because quarterly profits are all that they care about. Fundamentally, that is at the core of the current climate crisis, you know? The hold which certain industries have over various countries, and the fact that like said industries are governed by people whose only concerns is what gets them the biggest profit in the shortest amount of time. Long-term consequences be damned, right? If you have a form of environmentalism that doesn't challenge that, then what you have is not real environmentalism. Now, you might still be asking, okay, so environmental capitalism doesn't fix the climate crisis, but how does that lead to fascism? How does that lead to Nazism? Well, that comes in the form of some shared reactionary tendencies between those two movements. The talking points, for example, that humans are the problem, very Malthusian tendencies that a not necessarily anti-capitalist environmentalist movement would have. A lot of environmentalist talking points that are compatible with capitalism, that are compatible with a liberal capitalist world order, you know, neoliberalism, eventually and necessarily lead to Malthusian talking points about depopulation and the worst kinds of like eco-authoritarianism and eco-fascism that, while they would theoretically stop the climate crisis from getting any worse, would maintain the existing set of property relations that are massively exploitative and, like I said, created the crisis in the first place. You know? And for those who are not familiar, you guys, like, people probably know that Malthusianism and, like, Malthusian economics and whatever relies on narratives of depopulation a lot. Specifically, what Thomas Malthus supported in addressing the sort of climate crisis, which he viewed solely in terms of overpopulation, was he wanted to mass exterminate poor people. Every not anti-capitalist like form of environmentalism eventually just leads to killing poor people in very large numbers, right? Or allowing poor people to die in droves, because that is like that's the only thing that could address the climate crisis short of challenging the existing property relations. An alternative which, like, if you do challenge those property relations, people don't really need to die over that. Crazy concept, I know. Okay, I finally learned how to do that. I think a lot of people, these free movements push these green movements push people away because of this. They blame the people, not the corporations. Yes, thank you. That's exactly it. Very simple encapsulation of how green movements lead into fascism when they are not anti-capitalist is because they blame people, not corporations. And what are most people? Poor. It completely misses out on the fact that the almost entirety of emissions are caused either by the necessity of consumption of certain like economically unsustainable and like ecologically unsustainable forms of fuel. Poor people have no choice but to engage with that. And the fact that rich people do have a choice to change that because they have a degree of power, but choose not to. Refer back to the memes about rich people flying private jets everywhere and the like the top 1% being massively disproportionately responsible for all the emissions that we see on planet Earth, right? So you have the green movements that blame people and not corporations, and of course blaming people rather than corporations, and well, a class of economic elite that has perpetuated this crisis to begin with, and a system that has perpetuated this crisis, created this crisis through perverse incentives that incentivize unsustainable production and massively inefficient production, very wasteful production, through avoiding blaming any of the systemic and powerful factors that actually are to blame. You inherently lean towards blaming the most vulnerable, painting the poor, the migrant, and the minority as the scapegoat. And this is how you achieve a synthesis between greenwashing capitalism and Nazism, or fascism more broadly. If that makes sense. But now with that, I can actually get back to the role that that sort of hippies play in all of this, because in addition to the ignorance of the role of wealthy people and the systems that create such inequalities that people can have such wealth in the first place, there also becomes a degree of anti-materialism and lack of critical thinking, reactionism, and sort of spiritualism, such as the conundrum with hippies. Hippies are very like the flower children stereotypes and like spiritual, haha, flowers, peace sign, whatever, all that sort of crap. The hippie movement was very much like New Age spiritualist, and that sort of eccentric tendency, or esotericism rather, that sort of spiritual esotericism is itself a form of fascism. Hippies already are latently fascist because they have a spiritually deterministic worldview, and because they are like very anti-materialist in their political leanings. Despite their seeming liberalism, this will reliably and always lead to fascism. And that is how, through those pre-existing ideological tendencies, as well as the economic alienation that leads people to be frustrated with more mainstream elements such as the existing green movement, that is how you get a green to AFD or a green to fascist pipeline. Yeah, the politicians and activists flying in private jets to decide how best to blame people heating their homes and riding cars to work as the problem is so fucking ironic. Yes, although I would make a slight amendment to that statement. Activists are not the people flying in private jets. They don't have that kind of money. Lobbyists, though, they are. Actually, people would start disagreeing on former ideological groups fight and eventually just have a group zone, B group zone controlled by these groups. Because you're imagining that anarchy means there is no complex society. Look, I'm gonna resist the urge to get derailed on another one of those conversations. I think it's important to remember that because a lot of young people, like people my age, people of my generation or younger, name climate change as one of the number one issues that face the world today. And when that is like going to be the heart of the discourse, more and more so as the climate crisis gets more and more severe, as sea levels rise, etc., we need to have a more critical understanding of where this discourse will lead. And the fact of the matter is, if you don't take this discourse in an overtly anti-capitalist direction, it is going to lead to Malthusianism, fascism, and the sort of like depopulationist narratives that will necessarily be directed at the most vulnerable, you know, like I said, the minorities and the poor. What's the difference between ideological groups control territory and a state? It's cement. All right. Again, I'm going to resist the urge to derail just for a second to say future me, that theory segment about green to fascist pipeline, cut it there. You know what to do in the editing. Mr. Pink ML. I guess I'll just call you Pink ML or whatever, because that's like easy way for me to remember. The anarchy that you're referring to is not what anarchists are talking about. In an anarchist system, which you call a state, it would not be a state. A state implies that there is or actually a state is defined by a line, an arbitrary border within which a dominant like political group or just a political group in general controls things by way of legitimized violence. Will there always be some coercive elements to society? Yeah, obviously. This is not, I'm not making a utopian argument here, but in an anarcho-syndicalist world, the world that I want to see, the world that I believe eventually will happen in some form or another if we are genuinely on the road to like abolish the commodity form and whatnot, you're not going to have a state with a police force and a military. The two defining elements of a state, the police and the military, would be gone in an anarcho-syndicalist world. And to some extent, even in the later stages of a market socialist world, right? Like I've explained what anarcho-syndicalism looks like before, and it's not super complicated, at least in concept. You know, socialism has such a wide range of like ideological subvariants that like there are a million different types of socialism, but consistent to anarcho-syndicalism is that instead of a state, you just have like a wide federation basically of democratic trade unions, and instead of like firms and businesses and whatever, everything is basically a workers' syndicate. Right? So instead of the state, unions. Instead of, you know, capitalist enterprise, syndicates. Owned by the workers. Worked by, well, everything is worked by the workers anyway. Right? I guess on a certain level, you could say that, like, yeah, this is a semantic difference, because there would still, like I said, coercion implies soft power rather than the very hard power of the police and the military. You know? But no, an anarcho-syndicalist society would not be a state. Because that territory, like, when you say also that, like, oh, ideological groups would have control over a territory, nobody would have control over that territory. Motherfucker, haven't you read Thomas Paine? That land would be owned democratically and in common. Nobody would control or own it on their own. And also, I got mad because you came in here and immediately decided to derail the conversation and talk about how, like, anarchism is actually unworkable, and I'm smarter than you because I've read more theory than you. I know how MLs are. But, lucky you, I'm a bit more charitable to MLs than probably most people on the left these days. Because I believe in working with liberals and social democrats. Until such time that they decide it's expedient to shoot me in the back of the head. But, you know, that's what's what. I have a question on this too, if you don't mind. Yeah, sure. Shoot. Oops. You want to divide the world into different groups, have direct democracy in those groups? What the fuck? What kind of framing is that? I'm just gonna ignore that question because you know exactly what I said, and you can misconstrue it if you'd like, but you know, I said what I said. Didn't you yourself answered this question? This is like asked and answered shit. You asked about internationalism earlier, and I said, yeah, I believe in an internationalist movement. You know, no nation states means no nation states. Wow, that's crazy. Society is so big that, like, you're always going to conceptualize things at different scales and groups. Like, no shit. How do you stop communities in South America doing hate crimes on the LGBTQ community? People tend to be more conservative on average. Majority are in favor of discrimination against them. What stops them? Okay, two things. First of all, South America might be exactly the wrong place to pose this question because South America is actually pretty progressive, socially speaking. At least the northern components of South America and like Central America, pretty politically progressive in that respect. But obviously, you have like the reason that people commit hate crimes obviously is because of a lot of the scapegoating that has resulted from like fucking ignorance, if nothing else. Look, that's a like policy thing. The answer to that question already exists in real time right now in liberal democracies. It's illegal to discriminate against minorities. That's against the rules. Can't do that. Done. So that would also be like, oh, you mean the American South, like the USA? Yeah. Okay. Let's see how you make sure the general public agrees with and defends these values, and some of these groups won't start disagreeing using violence to have centralized government. It's called consent manufacturing. You should look it up. We do that shit all the time. In fact, consent has to be manufactured pretty hard in order for people to support authoritarianism. Yeah, no, in the southern states, like, how do you address anti-queer attitudes there? I mean, it's already happening in real time. You have to normalize the existence of these people, of like everybody in people's minds, right? And that's again a matter of consent manufacturing. That a lot of the reason that such a degree of reactionism exists is because the consent has explicitly been manufactured for it to exist. I don't want to get super class reductionist in saying that upending a capitalist order would immediately fix that or whatever, but by like chipping away at one, you chip away at the other at the same time, if that makes sense, right? Following the legalization of gay marriage in the United States, gay people became widely more accepted. Because now it was all of a sudden very, very politically inexpedient to be vocally anti-gay to such an extent that you were saying they're faggots and like affronts to God and nature and whatever, right? That's had a resurgence lately. Who controls the consent manufacturing and make sure everybody follows this? Well, you said yourself, right? This would be a direct democracy. Look, my patience is wearing thin for this again, alright? I didn't come here to have a discussion about my entire comprehensive worldview at the behest of a Marxist-Leninist, alright? I came here to talk about real shit. In fact, all of the things... Here's the thing, right? All of the things you've asked me about are things that won't even happen in my lifetime. Well... You have little patience? No, I actually have a lot of patience, just not for people like you, because number one, you came in here to immediately disrupt the flow of my chat when I was talking about what I wanted to talk about, and to instead talk about some shit that you wanted to talk about because you're an ML and I know exactly what people like you are like online. Secondly, it is hot in my room, so I will have slightly less patience now than on the average day when it is not hot in my room. And third of all, you've done nothing but exclusively ask me questions for which the answers have no immediate bearing in the real world, because all of the fucking things you have asked me are not things that are attainable in your or my lifetime. Like, that shit, like, those questions are shit that we won't have to deal with until long after I'm dead. You understand? We're not that close to the ideal point of socialism or whatever. I'm like, when you talk about anarchism, whether or not there's a need for a state, you're in big red button mode, motherfucker. Like, we're talking about, like, maybe in my lifetime we get market socialism. You know? How am I in ML? All of the nation state's acolytes are the same to me, but the only people I have ever heard defend the state outright are Marxist-Leninists. Either way, I'm at the end of my rope with you. One more thing and you're getting muted for another 10 minutes on this subject. You can ask me about literally anything that isn't, like, theory that will not matter in my lifetime. But if it's another fucking question about, how are you gonna say you're an anarchist? Clearly, anarchism is when no state, no order, no law, no fucking everybody murders everybody. I'm very smart. Like, you ask me another question like that, you're going in the hole for 10 more minutes. Because I think you failed to read the cues of the room. I'm economically center and socially authoritarian. Oh, so you're a Nazi. Okay. Well, there's not much difference in that case, but either way. In that case, forget the 10 minutes. This is way more fun. You're just going to get an outright ban once I'm done with this race. So enjoy what little time you have left. How are you economically centered, too? Hold up. I just fucking realized this. How are you gonna... I like how you want to ban me for disagreeing with your opinion. Well, no, I didn't ban you for disagreeing. As you may have noticed, there are other chatters and myself who have disagreements. I'm banning you because you're a retard. Like, how the fuck are you gonna be economically center when, like, the economic problems are like, yeah, fucking slavery still exists. And you're like, yeah, that's fine, actually. You know? God damn, dude. People really just be saying anything on twitch.tv. Oops. Very libertarian? What? I don't lean strongly towards left or right, so you're a Nazi. Yeah. The only people who call themselves centrists are people who love Nazism, but understand that it's, like, not very expedient to identify as a Nazi. How's that Nazism? I fail to see why I should justify that to you, given that you're a self-described center authoritarian, which is, you know, some Nazi shit. The only authoritarians who call themselves centrists are Nazis. You know, and I shudder to ask you your views on Jewish people. Or Arabs, better yet, if not the Jews. Nazis called themselves National Socialists? Ah, so you're one of those. Either way, bye-bye. You see the shit that I have to deal with, guys? He is Muslim, so he loves Arabs? Yeah, that's why, I mean, that's why I asked him... Look, there are two types of Nazis, right? In the respect of ethnic hatred. Type number one, they hate Jews. Pretty straightforward. Type number two, they are Jewish. They're like Israeli Zionists, in which case they love Jews, but they hate Arabs. So that's kind of like a checkmate. Ridiculous shit. Patently ridiculous. How are you going to come in here, defend the state, and then argue that, like, economically shit is fine? Like, motherfucker, the vast majority of the world lives in abject poverty as a product of, like, international capitalist businesses fucking plundering the third world and externalizing slavery so that it gets, like, the can gets kicked down the road. Things are not fucking fine. Oh, shit. Remember when I told you I was arguing with a Muslim about the age of consent? I'm pretty sure this is all... Oh, okay. I see. I got you. Dude, that's some lore. That's some fucking lore right there. Yeah. Do not be like that guy. Look, I have, contrary to what you might have, like, assumed from my discussion with that guy, I do have a decently high tolerance for disagreement, but you could tell from the way that guy was typing, from how fast he was typing, and the shit that he chose to talk about, this guy is terminally online, and, like, authoritarian of the worst kind, you know? Like I said, I have some tolerance for MLs, right? Because at the core of the Marxist-Leninist worldview is a strong sympathy for the interests of the workers and a strong skepticism of private capital, right? And so there are conversations to be had with those people about how do you best achieve the aims of a socialist or workers movement, right? But that guy was neither. He had like no redeeming qualities. And of course, also, like I mentioned, you know, he was doing basically the Twitch version of a Gish Gallop, intentionally or otherwise, where you just spam out messages because you assume that you have a right to the streamer's attention, and that sort of shit. And also that he, you know, assuming that he had the right to dictate the pace of conversation and the topic of conversation. You may notice when he came into the chat, we were talking about climate change, and I was like, had things to say about climate change. If you derail the conversation in a way that indicates a blatant disregard for myself and everybody else in chat, my patience with you is going to be very low. Because I don't think you deserve that patience. Like, you gotta be on topic, motherfucker. You know? Or if it seems like a topic is about to wrap up, you can propose a topic, but you fucking gotta let me... You gotta let me talk about what the topic is right now. Possible ban evader. Oh boy. I don't think any mods are in chat right now, so I'm gonna have to wait till the end of the race and then I can ban that guy. Yeah, get rid of that. Ow. That works out pretty conveniently because I was gonna let that guy have first anyway. Alright. Bye-bye. Spot. You know what? Let me just because I'm curious. Account created September 27th, 2024. I wonder. Anyways. What is the fucking Twitch thing do? Okay, here we go. Ban spotless system. Bye-bye. No solicitations in my chat. Thank you very much. I might not even get to talk about everything I wanted to talk about today, but that's probably fine. Okay. I've talked about the one, like, theory-related thing that I wanted to talk about, that being the green to AFD pipeline, and, like, how that bridge is made ideologically. Now let's talk about some shit that is immediately relevant. Actually, two things, but first let's do the trans-related topic. Where is it? I believe I saved the email. Yes, here we go. From Aaron in the morning. Groundbreaking study. Anti-trans state laws increase suicide attempts by 72%. That shit is not good. So I oh, okay. Well, there goes my video game. It crashed. I've talked a little bit about the anti-trans battle going on in the United States. I can't cover the, like, individual instances in which it happens, but basically know that if you are going to a state controlled by conservatives, it is going to be functionally illegal to be trans, and much of the social and medical support networks that trans people have to rely on in order to complete their transition and be able to function well in society post-transition or during transition, That's gonna not be present in conservative states. Again, because it's like outlawed. And now, because a lot of these laws were passed in 2022 and 23, a year and a half, 2 years have passed, and that is enough time for data collection to now be available to the public, for the data to be basically aired out, and for us to see the effects of that. I hate how happy that statistics probably makes some demonic Republican politicians. Oh yeah, this statistic makes Republican politicians very happy. This study about increased trans suicide attempts, published in Nature, offers critical insight into the effects of anti-trans legislation, including healthcare bans on transgender youth, and is the first study of its kind. Reiterating the headline, first paragraph reads, in a groundbreaking study published in Nature Human Behavior on Thursday, researchers found that anti-trans bans led to a 72% increase in suicide attempts among transgender individuals compared to states without such legislation. The study, which surveyed over 61,000 trans and NB individuals through multiple waves of questions directed by the Trevor Project, analyzed the state-level impact of anti-trans legislation. These bans primarily targeted gender-affirming care, bathroom access, and school policies. Had not been examined using this methodology before. The study's finding could have far-reaching international implications as more countries face pressure to implement similar restrictions on transgender people. You guys might remember there was a distinct phase of the sort of anti-trans right-wing talking points where they were sort of, there was one country that would cave to political pressure and use their medical institution to suppress trans care, and then that would be subsequently used as a perceived legitimate argument for similar transgender care restrictions in other countries. For example, like, the far right successfully, baselessly pressured the government of Sweden into suppressing trans care and banning it. Now, like, the government of Sweden did it, a reputable medical authority suppressed trans care. Why hasn't such and such medical authority in this other country done it? And on it goes. Due to the wide variation in laws and protections surrounding trans individuals across the U.S., roughly half of all states have enacted extreme anti-trans legislation, including bans on gender-affirming care. Meanwhile, the other half have passed no such laws, with many even expanding protections for trans people and their healthcare. This disparity allows researchers to treat the differing outcomes as a quote-unquote natural experiment, providing direct evidence that anti-trans bans cause harm in a way that few previous studies could achieve, evidence that the Trevor Project was collecting along the way. Same shit happened with 5G, really. I heard conservative arguments against it because Switzerland started to cave to pressure. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's right, yeah. Yeah, and for anybody not familiar, who's like kind of outside of the field of the fields of scientific study, a natural experiment refers to basically an environment where certain political policies create ideal environments where you can compare and contrast otherwise similar conditions. Basically, it is an experiment that has been created through sort of passive or more natural means so that you don't need to explicitly construct said circumstances in a laboratory environment. You know, you can find suitable conditions to test something scientifically just out in the world. That's a natural experiment. The researchers found significant harm. States that passed anti-trans laws saw suicide rates attempt by up to 72% among trans and non-binary youth aged 13 to 17, and by 44% among those aged 13 to 24. Yeah, this had a very pronounced and disproportionate impact on kids specifically. And like you said, there are some Republican sickos that are really, really happy that trans kids are killing themselves because, in keeping with the fascist tendencies and narratives, it's all about controlling the lives and sexuality, particularly of children. And the more degenerate children die, the better for the fascists. Whether or not they openly admit it, that is the sort of underlying ideological current at play here. You know? And as you specified as well, it is right to pin the blame for this mostly on politicians because, like I said, as per consent manufacturing and whatever, a lot of people like don't really care about trans issues in the U.S. one way or the other. And in fact, most people in the United States, even a lot of conservatives, are relatively pro-trans. You know? Let's see. On this straightaway, I might be able to. Strengthen the evidence of casualty. The researchers controlled for various factors, including state-by-state differences, race, age, the impact of COVID-19, and let's see, one more thing. I didn't quite see what it was. And even conducted alternate placebo tests. I don't know how you would accomplish that, but okay. Maybe, like... I just don't know. In explaining why youth aged 13 to 17 were more affected by anti-trans legislation, researchers highlighted healthcare bans, stating, quote, they may also rely on their parents or guardians to access gender-affirming healthcare or other vital resources. These additional complications, combined with the impact of anti-trans legislation, likely compound for younger transgender and non-binary individuals, contributing to the effects described in the study. Basically, young people are so especially vulnerable that this impacted them disproportionately because, like, you know, they have nowhere to go otherwise. And a lot of people in red states might have parents that are anti-trans or view them as subhuman. Even though I did say that a lot of conservatives are, even relatively speaking, pro-trans, most conservatives are really transphobic. That just means, like, they wouldn't literally form a lynch mob if their kid came out as trans. They might still do some pretty bad shit. The increase is significant. According to the Trevor Project, 20% of transgender youth in America have attempted suicide at some point in their lives. Using the Williams Institute estimate of 300,000 transgender youth in America, anti-transgender legislation could account for an increase of tens of thousands of suicide attempts by transgender people. Thanks to the large sample size, researchers were able to gather enough data on a state-by-state level to significantly analyze the impact of legislation targeting trans youth, as demonstrated in a table there. You know people like that? Yeah. Damn it, I was gonna say something and then I forgot what I was gonna say. They talk about trans people like they're degenerates and subhuman, but treat them decently. Oh yeah, of course, because these people are fucking cowards, of course. You know, they don't want to face any of these social repercussions for their beliefs, so they simply espouse them in private when nobody who would be affected by those beliefs are around to hear. This is what I was gonna say. These policies are genocidal in nature. As you said, the fact that, like, this is clearly what they were aiming for is, like, disgusting, and I can only regard it with malice, right? Like, this is the kind of shit that you would do if your objective was to kill trans people in very large numbers. And clearly that's also the effect that it's having as well. You know, that, like, the suicide rates are increasing in the trans community. I'm pretty far ahead. This is, like, you could use this as an argument many, many different ways. Like, on the one hand, like, the most crass thing I could see you doing is arguing that this is why you need to elect Democrats as opposed to Republicans. But the most important thing for me is that Republicans never be fucking allowed in public office ever again. This is, in my opinion, this is a very strong argument for banning the Republican Party from ever holding office again, is that their aspirations not only are overtly anti-democratic, but clearly revolve around killing large numbers of people with policymaking. This is a prime example of social murder, that, like, the policies are designed to have such drastically bad outcomes that people die as a result. This is more destruction than any serial killer in history has ever been capable of. You know? Like, white women be on their true crime shit and miss out on the fact that the real fucking villains of society are Republicans that casually write and sign bills into law that, like, necessitate that thousands of queer people die, like, additionally each year. Findings add to a growing body of research showing that gender-affirming care saves lives, while bans on such care, along with forced outing policies in schools and bathroom restrictions, have significant impacts on transgender youth and young adults in affected states. A Cornell review of more than 51 studies determined that trans care significantly improves the mental health of transgender people. One major study even noted a 73% lower suicidality among trans youth who began care. A similar study found a 40% reduction in actual suicide attempts over the previous year. In a recent article from April of 2024, puberty blockers were found to significantly reduce depression and anxiety. And a similar, like, a randomized controlled trial in Australia, different country entirely, even showed a 55% reduction in suicidality for trans men able to start on testosterone. So, a kind of a departure from the usual discourse which revolves around trans women a lot in the US and in the West in general. But, shout outs to the trans guys out there too, because that shit is comes with its own struggles. Yeah, it's like these policies are the policies that Republicans are pushing for, that a lot of conservatives and especially the far right are pushing for in Western countries about transgender people, are genocidal, because the intent is to, as you said, drive people into a corner and make their life otherwise unlivable. Give them a life so not worth living, or so, like, hellish, that they would opt to commit suicide, like, through intentionally constructed policy conditions. I wonder how much our country being socially conservative adds to our suicide statistics. Probably a significant amount. Social conservatism is all about the sort of violent enforcement of traditional norms and the isolation, especially, and control of youth. Seriously, like, it's remarkable how similar conservative and fascist movements are to this respect. It's all about controlling the kids and enforcing a very authoritarian social structure of like paterfamilias or whatever, and enforcing the patriarchy, etc., etc. That causes people to hate their lives, and when life is way more authoritarian, when you have less of a role in life, when it's more alienating, especially when you're part of the outgroup, suicidality goes up. So yes, on average, assuming similar economic circumstances, conservative societies will be more suicidal and more depressed and have a more pronounced mental health crisis than less conservative, more socially open, more left-leaning societies. In Germany, a recent review by over 27 medical organizations has judged that not providing treatment can do harm to transgender youth. The evidence around transgender care led to a historic policy resolution condemning bans on gender-affirming care by the American Psychological Association, the largest psychological association in the world, which was voted on by representatives of its 157,000 members. I think it's because our lifespans increased so much and birth rates dropped. Old people are still in control of society. Obviously that's a part of it. The increased lifespan can have some effect on that through like the retirement age being what it is, or through like, I don't know, through various factors. Like aging societies can have an impact on people's mental health if there's like extra strain being put on people that isn't being accounted for with state funding, right? Like that sort of thing. And then obviously declining birth rates in a society can lead to a lot of economic problems, which is why immigration is super useful, because you need that influx of new population. If you have strong immigration, like if you have a strong pattern of immigration like the United States, then a lower birth rate is not all that bad, because you're still getting new people and thus, you know, breathing new social and economic life into the country and stuff like that. But yeah, low birth rates with no immigration to sort of supplement the population is a recipe for socioeconomic problems, like a lot of problems. I'm holding this red shell. But yeah, as this article from Aaron in the Morning goes on to outline, is that this, like, all this stuff, there's a lot of evidence now coming out directly on the pro-trans side of the of the debate. Not that there wasn't already a pretty strong litany of evidence to support that, you know, trans care should be supported and not banned and shit like that. But like, I think the winds have shifted in terms of like the perceived position of governments and the scientific community, because now we know, like, basically beyond a shadow of a doubt that banning trans care endangers and kills trans youth, and supporting trans care and creating updating and adapting medical systems and stuff to that saves people's lives and enables trans people to live healthily and happily, just like you would ideally want anybody to. And I think that this deserves, like, as much as it might seem a dry reading of a news article on the subject, I think it is more than worth covering this because of the amount of coverage that the Cass review got. The Cass review was like a blatantly right-wing astroturfed, like, piece of medical hackery that was meant to sort of manufacture consent for governments to crack down on trans care. And I think this is a great counterpart to that. An overwhelming body of evidence to suggest, no, Dr. Cass, go fuck yourself. The shit that you propose, restricting trans care, actually kills trans youth and just kills trans people in general. So unless that's your goal, don't do that. And, you know, the implied undercurrent there being, if that's your goal, then what the fuck is wrong with you? Get the fuck out of here, you know? But of course, Aaron Reed always does really good work. I think old people just tend to be hateful. My grandpa's socially conservative as fuck. Anytime he goes down the street, he complains about guys having long hair looking like faggots. But recently I found out from my grandma that he is bi and used to fuck a shit ton of men. That is funny as fuck. Average bisexual European individual. Yeah. Somebody ought to, well, I think somebody ought to explain to him, like, motherfucker, you literally like penis. You know? And I'm not knocking him, because I like that shit too. But, you know, like, it's like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Not, like, I'm not gonna do the whole like, oh, he's hypocritical thing, but more so I'm interested in the like, dog, how do you not like understand the contradiction in what you're saying here? Like, what you're gonna get on people for looking like women because you clearly like both men and women, but like, what the fuck does that matter to you? So shocked when I found out about that, Lamau. I always assume that there is a general current of homoeroticism under every homophobe. You know, every homophobe thinks about dick and gay people way more than your average gay person even does. Like, they're gay as hell, you know? So anytime somebody is homophobic, I start, the suspicions start arising. And then obviously if somebody's homophobic as fuck, that like erases all doubt from my mind. Like, oh yeah, this person's a fiend for the cock and balls. And of course I say a fiend for the cock and balls because usually the most vitriolic homophobes are, the old men or just the men. But anyways. What do I want to be like the last takeaway from that segment? Because I think I am going to make that a segment. It's been a while since I did a nice segment on the political struggle of our trans comrades in America and elsewhere, evidently, as shown by this here study. I don't know. I guess I have said most of what I want to say. I guess this is the kind of social progress. This is an example of what I mean when I say that, like, consent has to be so concertedly manufactured for such a long time in order to have a sort of advance of reactionism at all, because it's like the vast majority of people are like, yeah, I think people dying is bad, actually. Like, it's so... I don't want to get into moral realist territory or anything, but like, it's so self-evident that in order to have a stable society, you don't want people to commit suicide, regardless of their, their immutable group affiliations, that like, this is just very obviously bad to anybody who's not an absolute psycho. And it is a very, like, convenient? I don't know. Look, what I'm trying to say is that Erin Reed does good work. She does good journalism. And this is unequivocally good news. It doesn't necessarily have any immediate legal consequences, right? Like, this is just scientific studies, and we know how much people in government listen to scientific studies, don't we, folks? But it does have consequences with respect to the discourse and how the issue will be talked about going forwards. That now there is no wedge with which to argue on any sort of grounds of reasonable skepticism that, maybe we shouldn't be providing such care to vulnerable youth. No, all the evidence now, like, not just all the evidence available, but a new overwhelming body of evidence supports the argument in favor of, like, kids should have access to medical care, whatever their needs may be. This chapter simply being with transgender care, because this used to be a hill that conservatives would die on for psychological care. It used to be taboo for people to get therapy, and that had to be a battle that was like struggled over and eventually resolved. And now this one, it seems like, has been at least taken to a point of progression where the only thing that conservatives can say as an argument against trans people is an argument straightly from degeneracy and nothing else, which is good for the public discourse, because it means that they're not going to be winning any sympathy from people who aren't already diehard transphobes. I think that I'm comfortable with that being my final take. Future me, cut the segment there. Oh, and of course it helps that, like, Republicans, every time Republicans open their mouths about trans issues, they immediately get blown out in whatever election or referendum is coming up relating to that subject. That's part of it too. Now cut the segment. What was it? I go for a while. I come back to trans rights talk. I love it here. Well, thank you. I'm glad it's a nice place to be. You know, it's not a nice place to be for centrist authoritarians who love the state and hate Jews. Hence the guy that I banned earlier. You know, we love a welcoming community, don't we, folks? Conservatives like to frame this as the left pushing pro LGBTQ. Yeah, you know, conservatives like to frame this as though the left are the ones contravening common sense or whatever. But then, like, evidence comes out in the form of scientific studies on mental health, on physiological health consequences that, like, oh no, this is just straightforwardly a matter of the right wing hates queer people and trans people, and the left are pretty, like, fucking normal. Big fan of Sneeko, by the way. Oh, okay. Man, I wish I had known that. You should have asked him about the age of consent. That would have been funny. Yeah, well, the conservatives are the ones pushing anti-queer narratives and indoctrinating kids to, like, hate queer people. It is really great. Sort of on a related note, that Tim Walz came up with the line, man, conservatives are fucking weird. Because they are. Like I said, the average homophobe, the average conservative dedicates so much space in their brain to thinking about trans girl cock and also regular cock and also queer people for the purpose of, like, hating them, that anybody who's, like, not a freak would be like, bro, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, why do you think about that? Why is that on your mind so much? Just let them live their lives, bro. Like, what did they do to you? Did they not let you suck their dick? Is that what you want or some shit? You know, like, that's the vibe I get from a lot of conservatives who really obsess over that. He said, "Oh boy." He says when it's when the girl has her period. Great. Call the cops on that motherfucker. You know, usually I'm not a huge fan of the cops, right? You know, we love a good ACAB here. You know, we're all part of the ACAB crowd, aren't we, folks? But like, man, if somebody says that, sometimes you just need somebody to get the shit beaten out of them, and it's like, okay, this one right here, officer. All right, stick your baton up his ass. You know, beat him up. This man wants to, like, do unspeakable things to small children. And he says for a guy, it starts when he's about 9. See, this folds into that point about conservatives being fucking insane. Like, no normal person believes this. I'm gonna chain this star, I think. Shrooms get 5th place. Not bad. Not terrible. Absolutely disgusting stuff from that guy. Anyways, I don't want to let that guy take up more space than it is warranted for them to take up in this chat, you know, even when they're not here. So I'm going to just write down some of those segments for September 28th. Yeah. Green to fascist pipeline. And then also... Nice. Cool. This will probably be the last race. Like I said, it's a little bit hotter today, and I don't want to run myself into the ground completely. I also started a little bit later. You know, this will be the last race, and I want to take a break. I just want to tell you guys that with the exception of that crazy Sneeko pedo-Islamist, you guys have been very good today. I'm proud of you. You guys all get a, you know, I'm the teacher. This chat is my classroom. Very Rosa Luxemburg pilled. The working class are the students who will educate each other and the world about the revolution, etc., etc. Oops. You guys all get a gold star. It sounds kind of jokey, but it is really like Rosa Luxemburg had such a fucking cool take on the working class and the nature of like a socialist revolution, that a lot of it would be built, like it being built from the ground up does like genuinely mean that a lot of this is going to be at the like the movement of the working class is going to be largely at the direction of the working class as well. So the like any activists and sort of political leaders where they may arise need to listen to the working class in this struggle as much as the working class should be able to like read the political landscape from a professional. It's like it's almost like anti-vanguardism, because it like it's like the ability of activists should be restricted, activists and academics and whatever should be restricted in the way of forming a distinct political faction or party to govern like the interests of the working class, you know. This was one, in fact, this was one of the disagreements that Rosa Luxemburg had with Vladimir Lenin at the time, you know. I missed the box. Yay, gold star. Nice. Damn, everybody's really close together in this pack. Oh, perfect. I'm in a back spot. That means I can get a good item. Give me this. That's good. Okay, nobody has the shock right now. Oh, baby. Star in first? Let's go. I'm using this here. Let's go. Can I talk about something that happened in my country this week? Yeah, sure. I mean, this was the last race, so I'm going to be going here soon, but feel free. Quick game. Oh, oops. I did not mean to do that. Let's go back here. Yeah. Who is live? Brian F. Brian underscore F is live. I'm probably gonna rate him once all is said and done. But first, I want to hear from Danny Poplio. Let me delete that. It's okay. We can talk about it next time. Don't worry. Oh, okay. Well, in that case, in any event, thank you very much for stopping by, for tuning into stream. Hope to see you guys next time. That being probably Monday. And now, Mr. Brian underscore F is playing as Terrence Bogard in the Street Fighter 6 video game. Brian underscore F. Alright, that's his channel name. Let me mute this for the time being. Yes, it is. Okay. Go. Once again, thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you guys next time. Enjoy the Street Fighter with Terry from Streets.